crazy.
Hi, this is Serendipity Soup. It's a podcast about serendipity, funnily enough. It's about success, failure, hard work and pure dumb luck. But it's not a podcast about celebrities or Silicon Valley billionaires because, frankly, they're not normal. So this isn't about taking lessons from thinly disguised humblebrags. Instead, it's a community of ordinary people with something interesting to say about how their life has turned out. If that sounds like you, get in touch. You can email me using soupofserendipity, all one word, @gmail.com. There might be happy endings, or there might not, because life isn't a story. It's much more complicated and wonderful than that. So, wherever you are in the world, and wherever you are in your life, I hope you'll find something useful to take away from these conversations. Hello, and welcome to Serendipity Soup, the antidote to celebrity success podcasts. I'm Matt Georges, and in this episode I'm talking to Tom Saunders, a man who seems to have done every job possible before becoming a successful publisher of hobby magazines. I have to say, it was a real joy talking to Tom. He's got a magnificently positive outlook on life, and even better than that, it seems that his sunny disposition has helped his career at every step as well. You'll quickly start to spot a pattern in Tom's career story. As each one of his numerous job interviews comes along, the person interviewing him says, "You don't know anything about the job, but you've got a great attitude, you're good with people, you're hired." Now, I'm not suggesting we should all turn up for the interview for the next head of the Bank of England with a cheery smile and a promise to get our heads around the detail later. But what Tom has taught me is that far from being a barrier to a good career or a sign of weakness, having fun, being friendly and helping people out can take you a long way. We all still need skills, of course, and Tom has plenty of those, but his give-it-a-go attitude elevates those skills, in my view, to the next level. Okay, housekeeping. No trigger warnings this time round, and only a couple of swearies, both from me, apologies for that. So it's all pretty simple. Okay, we're ready to go. Time for a taste of Serendipity Soup.
My name's Tom Saunders, and I own and run a publishing company called Silverback Publishing Limited, which owns 4 consumer monthly magazines.
Where did you grow up then, Tom?
Croydon. So I was born in Croydon, lived in Old Town for about probably the first 7-8 years of my life.
Yeah.
And then my grandparents lived around Elmer's End and Bromley Way. So, yeah, then we moved to South Norwood for the rest of my life, and I went to school called Ashburton in Shirley. Dragged up, I think is the best way to say it. But no, I had a good childhood, if I'm honest. I look back at it and I think, yeah, it was all right. It was a pretty decent area when I was younger. I think Croydon's a bit rough nowadays, but it was a cool place. I had a good bunch of friends around me at home and at school, and, yeah, good times.
You went to school, and then what age did you leave? Where did you go?
So I was quite good at school. I actually went to school. I never bunked off. But Ashburton really wasn't known for its academic abilities. I mean, I don't think any of my friends went to uni, and it was never encouraged at my school. It was always like you were going to go and do a manual job. You know, you were going to go and work in a trades of some sort. A friend of mine at school, her dad happened to run a welding firm, sort of West Norwood way, and he just one day said to me, "Oh, would you like to come and work for me? We're trained to become a welder." And I was like, "Okay, what else am I going to do?" You know, I did my exams and stuff, and did okay, but I didn't really study. I mean, all the school reports. My mum always makes me laugh. She goes, "You know, if only he tried harder, he could achieve a lot more." And I don't think I was lazy. I was just there was no one there to really inspire you to do anything. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was hanging around with my mates, playing football. We would go to Croydon and do the usual stuff that young lads do, kick about, listen to music. Music was very big for me when I was younger. But other than that, there was no focus on a general trade. So the welding opportunity, trainee welder, just kind of made sense. It was a regular job, quite well paid. And that lasted for a couple of years. And unfortunately, the business sort of had to be wound up. So that was 85 to 87. And the last sort of 5 years of the 80s, the building industry was on its knees. It was very, very hard to get work. My granddad, my dad's side, my namesake, fun enough, another Thomas Saunders, he was a master plumber and he left all these tools. He passed away, sadly, a few years prior to me leaving school. And it kind of dawned on me that maybe I should take that up. You know, he'd done well. He had all these tools. So I started to study at Carshorten College, plumbing. Back then it was City and Guilds. I don't think it's called that now. But anyway, did 2 years of City and Guilds plumbing with the hope of becoming a plumber. But you couldn't get any apprenticeships back then. There was very few opportunities in the building industry to do that. For some reason, I don't even know how I found this job, but somebody said, oh, there's a job at Do It All. And Do It All were a DIY, a bit like B&Q. They're no longer around, part of the W.H. Smith chain, but Do It All were like a big DIY shop on Purley Way, looking for a central heating manager. So I just chanced my luck. I went along and went for an interview, and they said, yeah, you got the job. When can you start? So I started, strangely, went from building industry into retail all of a sudden, pretty much overnight. That was a big change. That was 1988. So, yeah, was there for a few years and did that for quite a while.
Feels like a different skill set to me, that you go from, as you say, from a building trade, which obviously you're dealing with customers there, but that's a small element of what you do. In retail, that's like everything you do. That's a bit of a mental shift, right?
Well, it was a strange role because I was basically told to take responsibility as a manager. I mean, no management training whatsoever. But the only reason they took me on is because I'd done 2 years Sitting Guilds plumbing, and they just assumed that I knew everything about heating and plumbing. Well, I kind of knew a bit, but yeah, and as you say, I mean, there's like initiation training which lasted about a day, and it was very much, there you go, there's your area in the shop, you run it. Kind of had to think on my feet pretty quick. And customer skills, well, I had no training as such, but I mean, use common sense. You just be polite to people. That's kind of how I assumed retail worked, right? It was fun. I mean, I was quite young, and the team around me, there were various other managers on different departments in the shop. We all helped each other out, and that did help. But yeah, it was a strange move, if I'm honest. To this day, I can't quite explain why I did it, but I did, and it kind of set my career path along the retail route, really. I ended up working for Dixon's after that, which is now the Currys Group. Everyone knows Currys. Mm-hmm. Was there quite for some years. Back then, retail was very much like you were involved with everything, like stock take, product development, how to actually display products, obviously engaging with customers, dealing with complaints, looking at how you refund people, and all sorts of things, even down to security. You know, not very often, but every now and then someone would come in and try and steal something, and we were told you've got to go and chase this guy across the Whitgift Centre in Croydon. So the role was everything. And if the manager was off, then you might have to step into his shoes for a day or two while they try to find a supervisor or someone to cover. So I learned quite a lot in retail, I have to say, particularly how to deal with people, because no two customers are alike, no two people are alike. Everyone that walks in has a different expectation on what the service should be from, say, an electrical retail shop, for instance. So it did give me a bit of an eye-opener on how to deal with people.
There's an awful lot of stuff written about customer service, and I always thought it just boils down to just be polite. You could write it in one line, but actually from what you're saying, there's probably a bit more to it than that, and maybe being a bit facetious.
I look back at some of the training, and I think a lot of it's common sense. It is. I mean, I guess my dad's always said to me, you know, always treat someone the way you'd like to be treated. And it's just such an easy piece of advice. It's so true. Having said that, there are some people that are quite awkward, and they come in, and no matter what you do, they're just never going to be happy with the service. Now, that could be down to something that's happened in the past with the business they've dealt with that you're working for. It could be just a general, they just totally got out the wrong side of the bed. No 2 days in retail was ever the same. And it was hard work. You had to kind of think on your feet because you relaxed. Someone would always surprise you with either complaint, or they'd come in and really kick off. I mean, we had some very angry customers in Croydon sometimes. What I have learned from that is never expect people to behave the way you think they're going to behave, because they don't. Retail was fun. It had its challenges, but it was good fun.
I spent a lot of time when I was younger working in my local pub, And it was...
that's good grounding. Great grounding.
Isn't it just? Yeah. And we did food mostly. So I was like, worked behind the bar, worked in the kitchen, worked on the tables and stuff. And it's just as you say that I'm thinking maybe like 95% of the customers were nice as pie. And I reckon the 5% who weren't, I spent like half my time with. A bit like a teacher with like one unruly kid in the class. It's just sucks your time and energy because, you just can't do it right. And it feels like those things snowball. Somebody comes in and says, the machine for, I don't know, heating up the spuds isn't working. And then the angry customer orders jacket potatoes and you're just like, of course you did. Of course you did, because that's just this snowball effect. Yeah. Somehow you knew. I don't know how you feel about it, but my feeling from that was actually I kind of wanted to withdraw from that a bit. I didn't like the fact that if somebody was shitty to me, it really affected my day. And more often than not, there would be one person who was shitty, and I would remember that person instead of all the people who were really nice and really pleasant. I don't know. It sounds like you were a bit more resilient than me, maybe.
Don't know what it is about me, but I don't let things really get to me like that. I'd be angry for maybe 5 or 10. If they really got my back up, I might stomp around a little bit. I don't know, but I don't let it get to me, because at the end of the day, I mean, 9 times out of 10, you'd never come across those customers again. They drop their bomb of disappointment and then they disappear. Funny enough, I did some pub work as well, and so I can definitely appreciate where you're coming from. The difference between someone coming into a retail environment and a pub is invariably they're sober compared to alcohol, which sometimes either elevates the problem or, as you say, most of the customers were decent. But I never get one woman. I worked at a harvester in Surbiton years ago. I had another job after Dixon's. I went into recruitment and worked for Reed. But anyway, I had a little part-time job in between that, working at the harvester. And this lady, I never to this day will never forget her. And she came in and moaned and complained about everything. Didn't have enough peas on the plate, so I bought her more peas. Still didn't have enough peas on the plate, so I bought her more peas. And it was just everything we did. It was just the fork was dirty, the spoon was dirty, the saucer wasn't quite right. And I was like, this is, and I was really polite. And she was quite, I say aggressive is not right, but she's very like, really kind of, and I was like, she's not going to pay for a bill. I just had this sense she's not. Anyway, to my complete surprise, not only did she pay for a bill, this must be 1988, 89, she gave me a £10 tip.
Wow.
So after all of that moaning and complaining, you know what? You never know. You just never know. And I remember thinking, I will never forget that to the day I die. It was just one of those really awkward customers that I did not expect for 1 second would, let alone reward me, even pay for a bill. So, very, very surprised. So people can surprise you. And she said thank you as well after all that moaning and everything. And I think maybe it was an element of not biting back, being polite. I don't know, maybe calm her down. I'm not saying that happened all the time, but people are people. As I said, one thing I've learned all these years is you can't be responsible for the way people behave. You expect them to behave in a certain way, and if they lose the plot or are nasty towards you. And the other thing is when you're in the pub and when you're working in retail, I mean, I had sort of regular customers coming into some of the bars. Funny enough, I worked at a social club over in South North. My dad had a club he went to, and I got a little part-time job there. And this guy used to come in all the time, and he'd moan quite a bit. And he didn't really look at me. And I know this for a fact because I'd walk past him in the high street and I'd say hello, and he didn't recognise me. But he knew who I was behind the bar, but didn't recognise me this side of the bar. I think people just moan at something, but don't really recognise the person they're talking to.
Yeah, I take it very personally, stuff like this. I'm better now, but I did take it quite personally. As you say, there were locals in our pub, and basically their job was moaning. There was always something wrong. Thinking back on it, I should have just taken the piss out of them a bit and kind of got a bit of rapport going that way. But when you're 16, 17, you don't really think like that, do you?
No, absolutely not. No, if anything, it's quite intimidating, actually. And that's quite a young age to be working in a pub. There's some right characters, as you know, in public bars nowadays and pubs. Strange enough, it's weird how I kind of think I'm one of them. As I got older and I go to the pub, I'm now one of the characters. It's a young age, and it's quite hard to try and make your stamp of authority at 16 years of age in front of a load of 40, 50, 60-year-old blokes, women, whatever it is, that's not easy to do.
I should say for the record that I wasn't serving drinks at that age, just in case. So you had some time in retail. So you switched again into recruitment. What happened there?
I think I got bored of working for Dixon's, and I got kind of fed up in retail. I've done that probably about 4 or 5 years. But I like selling. I like dealing with people. Back then we had a paper called Loot. Don't get it anymore, but in Loot it was like jobs, and they used to sell like, it'd be like eBay in print pretty much, but they also had a job section. And it came up in Wimbledon. There was a company looking for a recruitment consultant. And I just thought, why not? Let's have a go. So I applied, not expecting anything, and I kind of got the job. And they were trying to launch an industrial and drivers section, which predominantly Wimbledon is mainly known for office and catering, but there's a lot of estates around there. And I never forget the manageress, Wendy Barrett, her name was, lovely lady. She said, clearly you've got no recruitment experience, but you seem to get on well with people and your rapport's good, quite chatty. I had a gift of the gab, I guess. But she's probably the very first person that taught me actually sales is about that, listening, and not that. And
for the listener, Tommy has pointed to his ear. So it's about that, listening, and then he pointed to his mouth. It's not about talking. Less gob, so to speak, as she used to put it, and more listening. And yeah, Reed Recruitment. So I joined them, and we started a little department within that, supplying drivers to companies like Royal Mail, Parcel Force, packers for warehouses, stuff like that, industrial forklift drivers. And it was a busy time. This is before the days of computers. We didn't have laptops or PCs on your desk. It was all name cards and lots of admin work, but it was a very busy little office, and built that up quite successfully to the point they thought, he's done so well, let's move into London Bridge. But there's hardly any industrial states in London Bridge or around the area, lots of offices, so that didn't go down too well. And I think I kind of did the job and worked for one of the managers really well. The second manager at the other office at London Bridge I went to work for wasn't really interested in me didn't really want me there, didn't believe that we could even develop an industrial driving section. So it was off to a non-starter, really, and I kind of wasted probably 9 months of my life, if I'm honest, at London Bridge. But again, I got to work in the city for the first time, and that was quite a novelty, going up by train every day into town, suited and booted. The buzz around London Bridge was brilliant. I loved all that. And they suddenly realised after about 7, 8 months, look, it's not working. Well, we'll try Victoria, which again was crazy because there's no real industrial states around Victoria. And I was like, really? And I was too young. It goes back to your earlier comment about I was quite young still, and then wasn't really vocal about, didn't say no, let's just, that's not going to work. Why are we doing this? And was listening to the hierarchy, so to speak, going, well, you must. Okay, you're paying my wages, or I'll do as I'm told. Again, didn't hit any targets. There was no manager at Victoria. So I was probably not focused enough. 50-50 of not having the right management helping me develop an area, also not recognising there was no way you could develop the service that they were trying to provide in that particular area of Victoria. But also, I guess I'd sort of become very disenchanted with the whole idea of working in recruitment, working for Reed in particular. And at the time, I'd made good friends with a guy called Martin Cook, who was the manager at Parcel Force. And I was just happened to be chatting to him one day. I rang him out of the blue, and he said, look, I've got a job. Do you fancy coming and work for me? And I said, well, what is it? And he said, transport manager. So I went, well, I know nothing about transport managers. He said, it's easy. Just come along. And I'm starting to detect a bit of a running theme here.
Yeah, it was I did a lot of that. Yeah. And it was almost like, the drivers were really miffed because someone had gone for the job who'd been working at Parcel Force for many years, didn't get it, and he gave the job to me. And what do I know about? They didn't know me. I hadn't been a driver. But so did working for Parcel Force in 1993, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was a really good job. The guys soon warmed to me, and it all kind of, there wasn't just me in the office. There was a couple of transport managers as well. But it was a really good job. It was easy. I didn't have to think about what I had to wear because you had a uniform supplied. You knew exactly what hours you're doing. Any extra hours you did was overtime. It was a very simple job. And I liked it. There's a bit of camaraderie going on as well. The group of lads that had come in, there was about 30, 40 drivers on a morning shift and about half that for the afternoon shift. Yeah, it was a really, really good job. And I was running the transport department for about 2 years. And then we'd often have drivers go sick or holidays, and they wouldn't be able to recruit someone to replace him. So I'd go out and do a round or something for a day or two. When I first started at Parcel Force, I will never forget the very first day, the union rep, lovely bloke, came up to me and went, you got your holidays. I went, yeah, like 4 weeks or whatever it was, a year. And he went, there's 2 more weeks you've got to take sick. I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you've got to take 2 weeks sick. I went, well, not even if I'm not sick. He went, yeah. And what I realised, and this is a bit of a shame really, but basically you were we weren't forced, but you were shunned if you didn't do it. But the overtime was generated, of course, by other drivers covering other drivers' routes, right, and shifts. And if this was in the canteen, there was this other sick calendar, where effectively you would take a couple of days sick and the driver would cover your shift. You generate overtime. So that's how they generated more income for themselves. Everyone went sick even if they weren't sick. So you could go and do someone else's shift and generate. And back then, overtime was like double time or time and a half. So quite a bit of money. You could really top your money up. And every year, Parcel Force would be in the news, we're losing money. And I was like, wonder why they're losing money. It was a very strange time. But yeah, the union really had a big grip on the way the business was run back then. I look back and think, okay, it was good that it protected people's jobs and stuff. I get that. But at the same time, there was definitely a little bit of skullduggery going on in how to generate more income. And I was there for a good 7-8 years and I loved it, absolutely loved it. But the job got harder and harder. They started to bring in time and motion study people that sit beside you when you went out and drove. And, we started with very small routes, 35 drops per shift, which is not a lot, to be fair. You could do it in a couple of hours easily, particularly if you did like a place like Croydon. Most drivers would go out at 9 o'clock, be back by 11:30, and they've done their shift, and you're being paid for an 8-hour day. So again, no wonder the company was losing money. But by the time I'd left, the target for drops was like 120, 130 a day. A lot of the old, I call them the old boys, but the original drivers I'd worked with that had been there way before me, when it was getting harder, didn't want to know, and the union were losing their control and power. And probably, to be fair, from a business point of view, that was bound to happen because you can't run a business like that. The losses were ridiculous. But I got sort of a bit tired of it. They moved the depot a couple of times. The one good thing about it is I met my wife. At Parcel Force, Simone.
Oh, right.
She came out of uni, got a job there, and that's where I met her. I loved the job, and I will never forget the fact that I met my Simone there. When was that? 1995, something like that. So so I'm thankful for that in that respect. But again, time for a career change and roll forwards. What am I going to do? And I did loads of little jobs. I was a milkman for a bit. I sold advertising signs in post offices for a couple of weeks. I tried to sell photocopiers. For what I did that for one day, I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I had so many different, I tried just different things. And 97, so after Parcel Force, I saw an advert for advertising sales manager at Link House in Croydon. Didn't know what magazine it was. I went along for the interview and I never got it. Sorry, we've taken someone else on. So I was like, damn, okay, I've got to find something else. And a week later, I got a phone call from Alan Morgan, who was the publisher. How you doing? I went, yeah, have you got a job? I said, well, I can't remember what I had, but I had got something lined up. And, don't do that. Come and work for us. I said, well, you got someone else. You didn't give me the job. And he was like, they never turned up. Can you start today? Sort of thing. So I'm next best, am I? Like that. And so we negotiated. I said, well, I want more money, blah, blah, blah. And so they gave me a little bit more. And that was my start in publishing, which I absolutely love. I still to this day get a massive buzz from it. It gave me the groundings, and I guess at long last, I found something I really enjoyed doing. We worked on a magazine called Car and Car Conversions at Link House, and we were on the top floor. There's lots of magazines within that company. There was Superbike. There was Hare and Hounds or Horse and Hounds or whatever. There was a Hi-Fi Weekly. There's loads of magazines there. But our top floor was known as, that's where all the degenerates go, the naughty boys are up there sort of thing. And we had like the racing motorsport publications up there. We had Race Car Engineering and Rally Sport magazine up there, and brilliant. And we're all on the same floor. I worked with some really nice guys, really nice people. Yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah, sounds it. So the publishing thing, when was this? This was late 90s, have I got that right?
1997, I joined Link House and was there for 2 years, year and a half. Link House was they were big, to be fair to me, but they were, in the world of publishing, they were quite a small independent publishing company. And there was a bigger publishing company called IPC in London that I didn't realise when I joined, were in the process of acquiring Link House and all the titles. There was a lot of disgruntlement when it happened. I mean, I was sort of new, so it didn't really affect me. But a lot of people that have been working at Link House for many, many years saw this big corporate beast coming and kind of they changed things. They were running things for profit. That's how they run a business. I mean, Link House was being run for profit, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the titles at Link House are quite hobby magazine. They were hobby type titles. And IPC were like, all they're interested in was the numbers. I want to know what can we make from this. And it was weird. I never forget, we were on the top floor. The floor below, Superbike magazine was an IPC title, and they moved them to Link House from Kingsreach Tower, which is this beautiful build. I don't think it's still there, I'm not sure, but in London on the South Bank, beautiful tall building. It overlooks big skyline, etc. Brilliant place. And of course, the staff at Superbike were not happy coming into this big old building behind Orders in Croydon. I don't think they were happy about coming to Croydon, let alone into the building. But we didn't have things like air conditioning or computers back then, nothing like that. And they moved into this sort of grey, big room. And I can kind of understand it looking back. They were very disgruntled about the idea of being there. So there was kind of big demands made from them. We want air conditioning, we want computers. But of course, that everyone else's nose out of joint in the building, because we're like, well, we haven't got that. Why have you got it? Yeah, a lot of really unhappy staff at Link House once IPC had taken over. To the point, I never forget, the director of IPC, she invited a select few of us up to air our grievances, and they put me forward as the guy to go and do it, because when I was at Parcel Force, everyone knew I'd actually become a union rep. And just assumed that I'd be able to, do some deal with the director of IPC. And they didn't care. If I'm honest, we sat in this big boardroom, massive table, as you can imagine. There was quite a few of us around the table from various departments at Link House. And they gave us about 2 minutes each to talk. It was like nothing. And then just turned and said, well, this is the bottom line. These are all the targets you've got to hit. Don't even understand why we went, if I'm honest, because they didn't listen to one thing we said. But the targets went up, and at the time I was selling advertising space on car conversions, which I loved. I loved the magazine. I loved all the shows we went to. We whisked off to the NEC at Autosport every year, and we'd meet all the big stars. Claim to fame, I had Jensen Button sit on my desk before he was famous.
Why was he sat on your desk there, Tom?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one. The guys that worked on the magazine, Nick Hall was a good friend of mine. He was a writer. He kept banging on about this guy, Jensen Button. He's going to be the next big thing. And we're like, yeah, whatever, Nick. Whatever. He was his best mate. They knew each other for quite some time. And at the time, I think Jensen was racing in Formula 3000. It was like 2 leagues down or whatever it was from Formula 1. And he just happened to come round one day to pick Nick up, and he came into the office. And again, he was like, look, this is Jensen. And Jensen sat on the desk beside me. I was chatting away to him. Nice bloke, nice young lad. No idea who he ended up to be, but he was a nice guy, I have to say. But going back to Link House, I decided enough was enough. It was getting silly. Targets went through the roof. You were trying to achieve advertising revenue that was just not achievable, even when things were going well. And it was clear to us they were going to cull a few titles. So I started looking around, and then thought I'd get a proper job. So I decided to go and work for Reed Elsevier, Quadrant House in Sutton. And they had a magazine called IBM Today, which is about servers. I know nothing about any of that, but I got the job. And it was interesting. We went from selling £500 page ads to 10 grand page ads to people like Hewlett Packard and, CompuServe, things like that. It was an incredibly different leap into what I call the proper professional corporate world. And meeting the buyers at Hewlett Packard was always an interesting day out because they want to be wined and dined. And, you know, it was just silly, really. You weren't really selling. You were just taking people out for meals and posh, swanky restaurants. And they'd go, yeah, there you go. I'll sign off 10 grand for an advert in your magazine. It was just a very small readership of IT directors. And yet people would spend more in advertising to reach those readers. It was quite bizarre for me initially. Yeah, I did that for quite some time, and I don't know. For me, I loved the idea of being part of something that was created, like for car conversions on Rally Sport magazines, the 2 magazines I worked on. I remember being part of the whole creative part, you know, development of it. And I made some really good friends with some of the advertisers who to this day are good mates, actually, really good friends who I've talked to quite often, who listened to me. And I think it was the first time I got into a role or job that went, he knows what he's talking about. And I'll give you an example. There's a chap called Dave Elderfield who runs a business called Rally Design, and they supply motorsport components to the motorsport industry, and particularly the Ford market, like classic Fords and stuff. And my first couple of weeks at car conversions, he rang me up and said, my ad's not working. You know, it's just like, I don't want to pull it. I'm like, bloody, I've just started and I've already lost a client. And I kind of said to him, well, looking at your ad, with respect, car conversions goes to people that are quite serious about doing their cars up. This is not Max Power. Now, Max Power was a competitive title, but was aimed at fast road cars, and you had dolly birds all over the magazine. You know, there was like, they always say 80-90% of the readership were underage, but bought it for the ladies with their assets out, so to speak. And that wasn't car conversions. CCC, as it was known, was about tuning your car on your driveway, going to motorsport meets, upgrading your car to go and compete on track days or grassroots level motorsport. So it was a serious guy, you know, a serious hands-on magazine. And I said to Dave, well, your advert's got all these dolly birds over it with respect to females that are on these adverts, and you can't see what you sell. And I said, you do all these parts, but you can't see it. You can't see them. And this is the way before the internet was really prevalent. And, I'll change it. So he changed his ad overnight, and his sales went through the roof. And so he always sort of champions me from that day of speaking out. He said, you're the first person that's ever told me I've done something wrong. And he's quite an authoritative figure, and he run his business the way he run his business. And not very few people could tell him what to do. But he said, the fact that you told me I was doing wrong, it's all suddenly dawned on me. And since then, we became good mates. He's the reason I ended up running and starting the e-bike business in Hampton Wick.
Help me out. This is the e-bike business. What's going on now?
I still stayed in publishing, and that particular guy, Dave Elderfield, owned this big warehouse down in Whitstable, Tankerton, and kept in touch with him on and off for years. I'd left Reed Elsevier. I took on a magazine called Kit Car Magazine, which was back to where I was with the motorsport title, so to speak. But Kit Car was more about building Caterham 7, stuff like that on your driveway. And we dealt with like 220 manufacturers. Anyway, kept in touch with David Elderfield at Rally Design because he supplied a lot of components, and he didn't realise we had a lot of components that you could use to help build a kit car. So anyway, one day he comes back from China, which he'd visit annually because he had loads of the parts for cars made out there and then shipped in containers. He came back, rang me up, come and see me. Okay, so I went down to see him, and he showed me this electric bicycle. What do you think? I said, yeah, it's brilliant. I said, but who are you going to sell it to? You're in the middle of nowhere. And he went, yeah, well, we'll put them online. Yeah, good point. And at the time, because I was working for the guy that owned Kit Car Magazine, I got the opportunity to buy Kit Car Magazine and start my own publishing business. This is 2012. And Dave rang me up after I'd been to see him and said, you need an office, didn't you? I went, well, yeah, I could do with one, really, assuming I needed an office. But yeah, I tell you what, why don't you sell the e-bikes? I'll set you up an office, but it'll be like a shop, and you sell the e-bikes in London. I went, yeah, okay, why not? I knew nothing about cycling or e-bikes, but it seemed like a good idea, and I was going to get an office out of it. And I like Dave. He's very straight. So we cut a deal. We looked for some premises, and 2 shops came up for sale in Hampton Wick High Street, opposite the Swan. Yeah, so we started in 2013. We launched the London Electric Bike Company, and I started selling bikes whilst running a publishing company with one magazine. again, huge learning experience, knowing nothing about the bicycling and cycling market. When I'd started it, there was one other shop up the road that sold another brand, and they weren't very happy that we were there. But we were selling a completely different range of bikes anyway. And of course, you've got Sigma around the corner, and they didn't sell electric bikes, but no one really sold them. And there's a good reason why they didn't sell them, because they broke down quite a bit. Again, back to retail. What I had forgot was that you were tied to a premises. You couldn't take a day off, or I can't be bothered to go in today. You had to be there. We hadn't really set it up quite right. I think we were too early because a lot of people didn't know what e-bikes were about. So loads of people walk in and just want to try them. To the point, I think a couple went out on two and they disappeared for the day. They went around Bushy Park. They came back covered in mud, and I remember thinking, no, I'm not doing this right. And they didn't buy one either, which was a bit annoying. So I had to change the whole process that. But I did that for 3 years, and I'd always said to Dave Aderfield that I'd give it the 3 years commitment, and we'll see where we are. But I think towards the end of the second year, beginning of the third year running it, 2015, I thought, this is not for me. It's just not working out for me. I'm not enjoying it. And I think if you don't enjoy something, you really do need to step away. But I did give it my all. I did try, but it was very labour intensive. You had to spend a lot of time with people to convert to a sale. It was really, really hard work. And the margins were okay, but it was very, very difficult because you had the cycling brigade that didn't want to be seen anywhere near an e-bike. They thought they were the devil's spawn. The amount of people that come in that really had trouble walking, let alone riding a bike. They thought this would give them the freedom, and it was quite hard when you had to tell someone, particularly an elderly person, that look, I don't think this is for you. And you can end up really causing yourself some serious issues. So it was an interesting time, and I'm glad I did it. But at the same time, didn't really work out, sadly. But in the meantime, in the background, the publishing company I started in 2013, Silverback Publishing, we'd started to take on a couple more titles. We acquired them, and I took on Retro Ford, and then a music magazine called Shindig came along. And the guys are brilliant, love them to bits, John and Andy. It's a really psychedelic, hippie, it's got a vibe to it, but it's got a really massive following. I mean, Paul Weller's a big fan of Shindig. He contributed towards it. He's been interviewed several times. Obviously, really sort of champions us. And we're kind of like an underground mojo record collector type tile, but it's very successful worldwide and really grown over the last few years. When I first took it on, it was like a quarterly, and it's now a monthly magazine. And love working with them. Brilliant. And then we had another magazine called UK Rock and Roll, which we took on board, which covers the UK rock and roll scene, obviously. That's quite underground as well. Kit Car, unfortunately, that scene died, so I stopped publishing that in 2016. But we had Retro Ford, which is also the classic car Ford scene, Capris, Cortinas, and that's still very vibrant, very strong title. And then out of the blue, Blocks came along, which is a Lego magazine for Lego enthusiasts. And who doesn't love Lego? It's really cool to work on. And Lego themselves are brilliant to work with. I mean, they're churning out set after set, and roll forward, here we are, still running a very, I call it successful business. Out of nothing, really. So, it's good fun.
I hadn't realised that this AFOL, adult fan of Lego, was a big thing.
It's huge.
And that's what Blocks, presumably, that's who Blocks is aimed at.
It is. I mean, it's aimed at that real hardcore enthusiast, and there are plenty of them out there. I didn't realise how big the market was. It kind of touches and tries to entertain them. Is that the right word? But tries to cover a material we think they'd like, and we have a lot of FAOLs involved with the magazine. I mean, obviously the editor himself, I guess, would class himself as an FAOL, and Graham is a really lovely guy, big Lego enthusiast, really knows his stuff. And then we've got a number of contributors that work on the magazine. Again, I mean, I'm really lucky. The magazines, one thing I've learned about publishing is you can have a brilliant title, but it's nothing without the people that contribute. It's a bit like your podcast, without you running in, I'd like to think people are interesting. I'm talking about myself here, but without good content, you don't have anything. And that's so very true with the magazine industry. And I'm always amazed that all publishers worry more about what the magazine looks like. That is important, the design and stuff, and the title's important. But if you don't have great content, you can't sell it. And I'm really lucky to have around me, the teams in all 4 titles. And yeah, the Blocks magazine is just phenomenal. I mean, it's so big. Lego just seem to be on this mission to create set after set after set, and they don't seem to be failing anywhere. They just seem to be, the growth for Lego is huge, to the point, they're involved with movies now, TV series, games. I mean, it's everywhere you look. I think the great thing about Lego is it's quite a cute brand. It's harmless. It's not, if anything, it brings a smile to your face. You can't help but smile. And I think for the older generation, people like myself and even older than me, always reminds you of your childhood. For most people, that's quite a nice thing, isn't it? Yeah, so they haven't lost their roots. But the magazine, we cover all sorts. We also try to make it easy. So if you're not a hardcore enthusiast, you can still pick the magazine up and learn something from it. So we cover the history of Lego. We talk about artists that are doing things with Lego. We cover all sorts, really. Also, we do set reviews, what's coming out, talk about the people, funny enough, the people that are actually involved in Lego, the designers themselves, we interview those. So we go behind the scenes, and we're lucky there. We've got, we're recognised by Lego as one of their brand ambassadors. They're kind of like their news networks. And so we get privy access to quite a lot of stuff that's going on, which is nice. And obviously helps the magazine. So I'm very lucky. I do count myself as a very lucky person to be running a business, one I love doing. I don't call it a business. It's a job. It's not even a job. It's a vocation. It's something I really like doing and look forward to every day. It has its moments, don't get me wrong.
What's intriguing me about this is that the story that I've been told or I've heard or picked up somewhere is that print is dead. It's all digital. Newspaper readerships or physical newspaper readerships are falling like a stone.
Yeah.
People are trying to launch new magazines. They're just going... And yet, that's the exact opposite of the story that you've been telling me. What's going on there?
I don't think I've done anything clever, if I'm honest. So print has clearly had a massive knock from the internet. I mean, the internet exploded pretty much 20-odd years ago, roughly. And I remember working for the previous publishing companies I worked for, the amount of research that went into it, digital, we've got to find a way of getting our content online. And a lot of them just jumped on it, not realising what to do. And also, they stopped really investing in print. They almost went, print, it's a bad word. And even though that is their main income, it always surprised me. From my opinion, and this is my opinion, obviously, one thing I'll always say to people, well, if print's no longer viable, why are there so many PC, computer magazines, IT magazines? Print's still important. It's still a great way to digest content, good content. What I've seen happen, and particularly speaking to other publishers who've also had success, we've seen what you've got is snippets of information. Like most news it's kind of small, it's snippets. And that's what most papers are. They're kind of like the headline, big headlines, very brief description of what's going on, and you can digest that quite easily on a phone or an iPad or a computer. For most people, a phone, there's a lot going on that screen. You're getting a text from your mum, like I did this morning. Morning, mum. You'll have an email coming in, then there'll be a phone call. There's a reminder from eBay, your bid's about to end, So you're getting constantly bombarded on your phone screen or your iPad or whatever tablet you use. And to digest a really in-depth article, it's almost impossible. One, the screen's too small, but also you're constantly being distracted by other things. For most people, a computer screen, like I've got in front of me, and I guess you have as well, is a workplace. So it's not really a place to sit and read an article. And this is where print comes into play. A magazine is so much more tangible. You give it to someone or you pick it up, and you've got that one-on-one relationship straight away. The minute you sit down with it with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, you've got this printed publication in front of you. And other than the doorbell going or your phone ringing you, but there's nothing that pops up in the magazine to distract you. It's like one-on-one. And I think what's happened is, I know from our readers, strange enough, particularly from Blocks, which is a bit of a younger generation of reader, who I would have thought we wouldn't capture anymore, because as you say, there are so many Lego sites out there. It's incredible, like enthusiast sites.
What are we talking when you say younger generation? What sort of age?
Like 12 years old to sort of mid-20s.
I thought you were going to say 30s and 40s.
No. Sort of 12-year-old to sort of like mid-20s, to 30. But
okay,
definitely that generation that have never not known the internet to be around. My son and daughter just have never not known the internet. It's always been there, and it's very it's really hard to get my head around that sometimes. So for them to be buying magazines, like Blocks, for instance, it's quite a positive thing for me, obviously as a publisher, but it's positive for the publishing industry. So good content in print still sells. Now, strange enough, we do actually have 3 digital platforms where the magazines are available to read: Pocket Mags, Exact Editions, and Readily, and they work quite well. We do get a great return from those, but they come nowhere near the print sales. And I think the other thing is we are a hobby consumer title publishing company, and I think when it comes to hobbies, people want to get away from work, they want to turn to their hobbies, they will focus on that. So I think print, in conjunction with digital online environments, has a place still. Print's still very important. The local restaurants still print their menus out. You can have a lot of stuff online, but it's not always the best way to absorb it. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to. And I think that's where print becomes still quite viable. And invariably, they complement each other quite well. But print, for very interesting, in-depth articles, still wins, in my opinion. And not just my opinion, but, I mean, you look at Waterstones earlier this year, were championing record sales on books because of the lockdown, obviously. Although they were bought online, the irony of it, all the sales were online, books were sold, I think they had like 100% increase in 1 month of book sales online in June or July last year, I think it was. But yeah, so print's still very, very viable, and it still has a future.
That's really interesting. Like I say, very different story from the one that you hear in the newspapers, which maybe suggests that the newspapers don't have great content. But who am I to suggest that?
I think the problem you've had with papers, but the main tabloids, is the power they've enjoyed in basically for many decades now, for as long as I can remember, even when I was younger. If the Sun said jump, you'd jump. The whole world next day would jump. And I don't think it's no longer the case. I think people are quite savvy nowadays. I'd like to think so anyway. I mean, okay, there's some theorists out there that don't believe in this or don't believe in that. But in general, people can go and research a lot of stuff online that is legit. And there's a lot more common sense now. Just because, I don't know, the Daily Mail says don't vote for this person, vote. That doesn't I don't think that works anymore. I think the tabloids have realised they don't hold that sort of power over the people. That's a very different type of print compared to consumer titles, which generally are hobby-led. And as I said, the guys that write the content for my magazines are actually enthusiasts first. They're writing about their own interests. That's what they're doing. And that sells because you're talking to like-minded people.
I've been thinking about, just as you've been talking about, some of the themes that have come up, because you've essentially moved from being a welder to a plumber.
Trainee welder.
Trainee welder, I do apologise. Into retail, into recruitment, back into retail, then into publishing. You kind of pinged around a lot. So in terms of the subject of this podcast is serendipity. A lot of people, there's a moment of serendipity where their career is kind of bumbling forwards and then suddenly takes a very sharp turn. Whereas it feels like yours has taken lots of little turns and bounced around all over the place. And the sense I got was that you've really made your serendipity moments. Even when you're talking about, the guy who rang you up about the e-bikes, etc. But that's because you've put the time in to create a relationship with him. And in fact, it was the guy that you kind of stood up to and said, I don't think you're doing this right.
That's right.
And so created that moment of serendipity, if you like. Is that how it's felt to you, that being something that you've done, or that this stuff has kind of appeared from left field?
Now you say that, yes, but not at the time. I've never recognised myself as being smart or clever or doing anything else other than just going out there and making friends. For me, life is about having a laugh, and it still is. I know it sounds so unprofessional, I know, but my glass is always half full, never half empty, is kind of how I approach life, trying to be positive. Don't wake up and think, who can I piss off today? That's not me. I think what I recognised today, fun enough, was that actually I've networked without even realising I'm networking. I think a long, long time ago, there was a guy called Tony Tobias at Link House when I first started in publishing, who I absolutely, to this day, still admire. He's an energy beyond anyone I've ever met. He'd roll in when he wanted to. He worked on motorsport engineering magazine, and he was the advertising guy, and he'd come in at 6 p.m. to work, and I just admired his enthusiasm. He was a unique character. It dawned on me that people bought from Tony Tobias. They didn't buy because of the magazine. They didn't buy because of the publishing company. And funny enough, he now runs Autosport Engineering at the NEC, and they call it the Tony Tobias Show. This big hall, and everyone knows him. Everyone in motorsport knows Tony Tobias. There isn't one person that doesn't. If you don't, then you're not in motorsport. But he's such a really decent, nice guy. He's so down to earth, and he's, it's weird. He seems to muck about all the time. He's never serious. If he ever hears this, he'd probably kick me for saying this. But he's like a big kid. But he's charming, and he listens to people, and he tries to go out his way to help people. And I never get him saying to me, never burn any bridges. Don't ever, whatever you do in life, just make friends with people. Just stay, don't try and sell to people. Just be listen to them. And if you've got something to offer, then offer it. But don't force people to do things they don't want to do, because they won't come back or they won't remember you. And I don't think I did that on purpose, but I think you're right. I love that comment you just made, is that I've made these pivotal decisions in my life. Actually, I didn't realise I made them, if that makes sense. I never knew. Me staying up to Dave all those years ago, it just, to me at the time, seemed wrong. It's like, this is why it's not working. It's almost like common sense. And roll forward, and fun enough, I was on the phone to him the other day, and he's helped me. My daughter's off to Southampton, and he was trying to help with stuff because his daughter and son had gone there, advising me, and it's just stuff like that, and I don't see him as someone that I work for or work with, or he's a client. He's just a guy I can speak to who's very successful. And I think as you get older in life, you start to say no a lot more to stuff. You can kind of afford to do that. But also you start to gravitate around people that you want to be around with. I think people enrich people without even realising they're enriching people. And it's not like you're trying to take something away from them. I'm saying I'm quite quaint now, and I know. But it's so true. I genuinely believe that you can have a better life if you get the right people around you. Yeah, maybe as you say, that is the moment I've just started to realise I've actually done a lot of networking without even realising I'm networking. So
I don't think there's any rule book that says you can't have fun and still do your job.
I agree with that. I think it's weird. I think in the UK, I can't speak for many other countries. I've got family in the US, and the US, although we always think of them as being really like hard workers, long hours, and there is still a case of that. You've got to be a career animal. They seem to have a lot more fun than we do in the corporate environment. My sister-in-law works over there, and she works hard. She's done really, really well for herself. I still sense that they get a lot more autonomy. They're a lot more casual. And what I do love about the Americans, I don't know if you've ever dealt with them, but they're open to any idea. I mean, they're really happy to listen to you. Here, we just seem like no one wants to. I mean, it's changing, but here we're kind of like Victorian in our approach when it comes to running a business. My son's going to school this morning, and he's in the last year of his junior school, and they have to wear ties and shirts now. And they do make me laugh because he looks like a little mini businessman. But I'm thinking, why does he need to? Like last year, he's wearing a polo shirt, which is far more comfortable, and now he's got to put this damn tie on. It's like, I don't know. I don't get that anymore. I don't think you need to be dressed in a certain way. You don't have to just do your hours at work to be productive anymore. And I would like to think that this pandemic has proven that, although, listen to some business owners, they're like, no, everyone must come back to the office. People aren't productive at home. I don't believe that. I don't know about you, but the amount of meetings I used to go to that were totally irrelevant to my job, I'm wasting so much time here. And, then you get, I say Doris, it could be anyone, but they come up to my desk and you've got 20 minutes of idle chat there. I don't get any of those distractions at home. All right, I put the washing on. I might have to feed the cats, take my son to school. But also the quality of life has got to be just as important as having a good job, right? And that there is a balance there. It can be done. Trust me, I'm doing it. I've been doing it for the last nearly 20 years. You can work from home, and we are a successful company. We are growing year on year, and it's work. That's not just me. My business partner, Andy Crispin, massive thanks to him for getting involved all those years ago. We love working together. I don't know about you, but I couldn't go back to that environment. I'm not good at taking orders anyway. But also, I don't think it's necessary. If I could give anyone, and I always say this, when someone talks about work, what do you reckon? I always say to everyone, try and work for yourself. Just have a go. Find something you really love doing and have a go at it. Be brave. Don't be scared. What's the worst that can happen? It doesn't succeed. So what? At least you can turn around and say, you know what? I had a dig at it. I had a go. You just never know. And I think you've got to have a go at stuff because you just don't know. Sometimes it'll work out and sometimes it doesn't. And it's not easy for everyone. I know not everyone's the same and some people can't do that. They want the security of a paid job and all the benefits that come with that. I get that, but I couldn't work in an office anymore. I couldn't work for someone else, if I'm honest.
I'm getting the sense of what you think of as success here, which is really nice. I was thinking about, in particular, the e-bikes thing. So there's quite a famous phrase. It's like something to do with an idea whose time has come. And it was like you were maybe 5 years too early.
Yeah.
Maybe not even 5 years. How does that feel, though? Because, you put 3 years into that, hard work, it didn't work out for you. And now e-bikes, they're a big thing. They're taking off.
Well, what do I get out of it? I made a lot of friends in Hampton Wick. I found this beautiful area that I really fell in love with without that access and meeting these people. But I met some great guys, and the business itself, it didn't work. But I'm not losing sleep over that. Again, I was taught a long time ago, particularly in sales. Sales is always about get something from your meeting with someone. Even if that's a commitment to phone back in 6 months' time, that is a success of a call. A cold call is you literally call someone for the first time. Try and get something from it, whether that be a call in a year's time, whether that, I know that you're going to launch, whatever you're selling to try and sell to this person, but get something from them. And it doesn't have to be a sale. It can be anything. And so I look at life like that. So, all right, the e-bike business didn't work, but I got a lot more from it. And that is great friendship, good mates. Again, I learned a lot about cycling, even though I'm not a cyclist. I learned a lot about not what to do when it comes to running an e-bike business. Totally enjoyed my time. I did enjoy it. There were tough days, but I definitely enjoyed it. I don't see it as a negative. I don't lose sleep over it.
No, that's really good. How would you define success then? Because I've learned a lot from this conversation, and it's really important to me because I'm right at the point now where I'm thinking, do I become self-employed? Do I not? Do I go back to the office? So listening to you has been really inspiring for me, Tom.
Thank you. I don't think I am, but I hope you find whatever you need. The thing is, really got to bear in mind, whatever suits one person, doesn't suit someone else. And
of course.
The one thing I do wish is that I'd gone into business for myself a lot younger. So I'd have a lot more energy and enthusiasm. And I'm 53. I can't remember what age. 53? 53 this year. All right, I'm not an old man, but, I clearly had a lot more energy when I was in my 20s. I wish I had that kind of nous to do something then. Now, what that was, I don't know. But I generally believe that you should always have a crack yourself. And I think, actually, nowadays, there's far more opportunity and support and help to business than ever before. When I go back 30 years, there was nothing like that. There were no grants around, really. Crikey, trying to get a business loan from a bank was almost impossible. A lot of it was hand-me-downs. People that used to work for themselves tended to be working for their dad or, someone in the family that meant, oh, we've already done this, here you go. Launching a new business is almost unheard of. So to do it now, I think you're in a real prime time to be doing it, particularly from a support point of view.
What do you think success is?
It means so much to so many people. For me, I think it's being able to run a business that suits me. And what I mean by that is I've got to a point in my life, and I thought about this about 10, maybe 15 years ago. I want to do something, one, that I enjoy, two, that covers my bills and pays the mortgage, etc. But also gives me full autonomy to do what I want. So if I'm going to go gym on a Tuesday or Thursday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or bob along to see my mate Wayne in the coffee shop, I can do that whenever I want. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. There are times when I need to be here to do stuff. But in general, I think that's success. I don't think for some people that might be a Ferrari or owning a yacht, but I don't need them. I don't know what I'd do with one anyway. But money's important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. And I think what I've realised is I've been around to see my children grow up, which is lovely. I'm here for them if they come home from school, if they want to run into the shops or, I don't know, my son wants to go to the park, we can do that. I think that's success. I think, and silly little things as well. Being able to help other people, give them a role within your own business, or, I don't know, put your hand in your pocket and help someone out a little bit. Even getting like a complete stranger a beer at the bar. That to me is success because I can afford to do that. So building up a business that enables me to kind of really run the life that I want to lead and work because I want to, not because I have to. I think that is, to me, that is success. And that sums it up for me.
Fair enough. Brilliant. It's been a massive pleasure talking to you.
You really made me reflect on all these years I've been working. I thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. Huge thanks to my guest Tom Saunders for taking the time to talk to me. Thanks also to Julian Holmes for his awesome cover artwork, to Anna Gunn, as ever, for her amazing editing support, to Acast for hosting, and of course to you for listening. Remember, if you think you can add some flavour to Serendipity Soup, get in touch. You can email me at soupofserendipity, or one word, at gmail.com, find me on LinkedIn, or look me up on Twitter using the handle @soupserendipity. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon for another serving.